Gerard, can I please have you to the stage with your first guest? And Gerard, like I say, will be hosting a fireside on the global innovation map.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, man.
Round of applause for Dan. He's actually been a terrific host. And actually, I don't know if you know the organizers of CogX, but we should put a round of applause for Tabitha and Charlie, actually, who put this on. So, yeah. So, thank you very much. So, global innovation map. Before we get started about that, Sunil, why don't you introduce yourself? Because I am honored to be interviewing you today.
Trust me, the honor is all mine. My name's Sunil Wadhwani. I'm from India originally, engineer by background. Moved to the US, to Carnegie Mellon many years ago to get my master's degree. Since then, I've stayed in the US. After Carnegie Mellon, I've started several different companies. My first company was a medical device company, which unfortunately didn't make it. After 5 years, we went under, but learned some lessons. And those lessons came in handy when I started my second company, which was an information technology company. And that company grew to over $1 billion in revenue. I took it public, and it got sold a couple of years ago for $4.5 billion. So you learn a lot, more from failures than from successes. I still have several other operating companies, but and I've been a very active angel investor over the years, over 45 or 50 early stage companies. But what really excites me now are two nonprofits that I started in recent years. 5 years ago, I started a healthcare foundation, a nonprofit in India. And the idea is, how do we use technology and innovation to transform substandard primary healthcare systems in very low income settings? Regions where people are earning less than $2 a day. So in urban slums, in very poor rural areas. That scaled up quite a bit. We run several hundred clinics in the worst parts of India. Last year, we treated over 5 million people with free healthcare, and that number is growing every year. Separately, a year ago, my brother and I, he's also a technology entrepreneur, also in the US, we were talking, and we were saying, look, there's so much happening in the AI field, but 80% of all of that effort is being focused on how to sell us more stuff, how to target ads at us, how to sell at us more effectively. The other 20% is going into areas like healthcare and education, but mainly in the rich world, in the wealthy countries, UK, US, Japan, etc. And there is virtually no one in the world focusing on how do we apply AI to improving the quality of life for the bottom 1 or 2 billion people in the world who earn less than $2 or $3 a day. So we've started a nonprofit AI institute in Bombay, in Mumbai, India. And we have about 30 full-time researchers working there right now. And that number is growing. Hopefully, in a year from now, we'll have 60 or 70. So that's kind of what I do. And in my spare time, I play drums in a rock and roll band in Pittsburgh. So.
We'll certainly ask you about that, too. Thank you so much for that introduction. Just a show of hands. Who here works in the tech industry? Okay, and who works in the tech industry and did a computer science degree? Okay, it's pretty more than I expected. Who doesn't work? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the risk. And who's an investor here? Okay, so we have a handful of investors. That's good. So that's really interesting because obviously you've built very profitable companies, and now you are a founder donor in 2 institutions. Why do we not see more social entrepreneurs building billion-dollar valued businesses impacting over 2 billion people yet?
It's a great question with not an easy answer, but here's what I would say. Having been on both sides of it, right, on the for-profit side and the non-profit side, when you set up a for-profit business, you've got investors, and even as a social entrepreneur, you've got investors, you have a board of directors, and at the end of the day, it's about scaling the company and, to the extent possible, maximizing your value, maximizing your profitability. Much as you might want to have a social impact, at the end of the day, it's clear which priority is higher to your investors and to the board. So if I start, let's say, a social enterprise in India or Ethiopia, let's take India as an example, and I want to provide healthcare and have impact, if I really want to do it for the people that need it, right, who earn less than $2 a day, there are a few commercial business models that actually work for people whose incomes are that low, but that's where the impact is truly needed. So at some point fairly soon, my investors and my board are telling me, look, there's 300 million middle-class people in India. Let's target what we have towards them, because then we can scale up faster, get our value up, etc. The people who earn less than $2 million a day, as I said, there are very few examples of social ventures, for profit or non-profit, that have truly scaled up. I was speaking with some senior people at the Gates Foundation. They do this internationally. I was speaking with people at the World Health Organization. And really, between all of us, we've come across very few ventures that both have, that want to have large-scale impact, but have been able to scale up and be sustainable. And that's really challenging. I do believe, I'll just close out the thought, I believe we're on the verge of making that change. And transformative technologies like AI give us, I think, a new way of having impact without the need for giant amounts of investment. So I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we will see a new wave of social entrepreneurs, and many of them already exist. But I think we will see organizations scaling up that can have impact in a way that they haven't been able to before.
And I guess given the topic of the panel, yes. The fireside chat, I should say, where do you think that might happen?
I think it's happening everywhere. I mean, I see really sharp social entrepreneurs all over the world. I mean, based both in rich countries like the UK, US, Germany, etc. But I see an increasing number in places like India, China, Brazil, Ethiopia. They're everywhere. So, and I think in all of these countries, first of all, when you're trying to impact people at that level, I believe the best solutions come locally. Many of the solutions, the social impact solutions that we develop, let's say in developed countries, really it's tough to implement them at scale in a very different context, as you might have in an urban slum in Mumbai or in Ethiopia. So the good news is that I think in these developing countries, from where the solutions need to emanate, you've got now a culture of innovation. You've got thousands of entrepreneurs. Many of them want to have a social impact. You've got transformative technologies like AI. And you've got politicians and bureaucrats who are willing to listen and give these new ideas a chance. And I think that combination of things provides a really unique opportunity for social entrepreneurs.
And you're an investor, and you've invested in over 50 companies so far, many more to come. When you're looking at social impact companies, using technology, using data and AI, how have you looked at those companies differently to for-profit companies, if at all? And if so, how?
Interestingly, I don't look at them that differently. So the lessons that I, for example, learned as an entrepreneur, I'm using all of those same lessons in my nonprofits, okay? So, like I said, first company that I started didn't work, was a failure, but those lessons came in handy in the next one. 50 of the angel investments that I've done, about 20% of them have had wonderful success. They've gone public or sold, etc. About half have gone down the tubes. The other 30% are in various stages in between. So you learn lessons on what it takes to scale. So to me, the three things that it takes to scale, very simply, and there's no magic or, over here. One is, whatever problem you're trying to address, the solution you've developed for that, how unique is it and how compelling is it? And that applies for me as much in the nonprofit world as it does in the for-profit world. Whatever service or product you've developed, how unique, how compelling is it, right? Because for scale, you need those. Number two, your operating model for scaling this up, how good is it? Meaning, how will you, grow the revenues for your product? How will you grow your margins? And the issue is, how quickly can that operating model scale, and how quickly can you become sustainable? It's not an easy question to answer. whether you're for-profit or non-profit. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, I see a lot of business plans, haven't really thought it through that well. How does my operating model scale and become sustainable quickly? So that's the second piece. The third piece has to do with the leadership team of your organization, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, and how effectively can the leadership team scale? It's a different question from, are they good or not? Because my experience has been, even in the for-profit world, most ventures, most technology ventures, as we know, that start up in the UK or US, wherever, 70% of them don't succeed. But even of the ones that survive those first 4 or 5 years, most of those plateau out at less than 100 employees, most of those. Very few, I would say less than 10 or 20%, make it through that level. And the reason that they don't grow through that level is that the founding team, and particularly the founding CEO, the entrepreneur, isn't able to scale.
Is that more the case, sorry to interrupt you, because I've witnessed a lot of this myself, is that more the case in impact-related companies?
No, that's absolutely across the board. So you take your Silicon Valley ventures and your London ventures, who there's no social impact, they're pure commercial ventures, even most of those don't. And the reason is, look, I'm an entrepreneur, many of us here in this room are entrepreneurs. How do you define an entrepreneur? Someone who wants control. I mean, the reason we start companies is to have control of our own futures. So when you start the organization, the venture, you're making every decision, right? You are hiring each person in the team, reviewing every proposal, doing all of that. All of that works until you get to about 70 or 100 employees. After that, you have to give up control to other people that you hire. And for a lot of founder CEOs, that's very tough to do. Yeah. That's the biggest scaling factor, and again, whether you're for-profit or non-profit.
Sunil, unfortunately, we only have 2 more minutes, but I just want to ask you a question, which is, if I didn't ask you where your 50 investments are, but roughly speaking, where are the 50 investments? And if you are looking at the world map now and looking to invest in social entrepreneurs, where would you rank certain countries?
On an overall innovation basis, I think the developed countries in the world obviously are far ahead, right? UK, US, etc. So far, all of my commercial investing, a lot of it is in places like US, UK, some in India, some in China, some in Israel. But for the social ventures, most of what I do over there is in India and in sub-Saharan Africa, because that's where the need is and that's where people understand the issues. The final point I'll make is to the topic that we have over here, global innovation networks. What's amazing is that all of the organizations that I'm involved with, including my AI Institute and the Healthcare Foundation, we have partners that we work with that truly are global, all over the world. So even my nonprofits might be based in India, but we work closely with Stanford, with MIT, with Carnegie Mellon, with Cambridge University over here. We work with organizations like the World Health Organization, et cetera. So again, whether you're for-profit or non-profit, tapping into that global network of partners that can really take what you're doing and put it on steroids is very important. And thinking about that right from the beginning is very important.
Sunil, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Sunil, thank you. So Yossi, you're back from the bathroom. That's great. You did say it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Yossi Vardi on stage. Who knows Yossi Vardi in the audience? Hands up. See, you already have a few fans that have been following you around.
Don't ask me. Who doesn't know?
Yes.
We'll see lesser hands. People don't like to raise their hands. It's too much effort.
So were you here, Yossi, when I asked the question about who in the audience is an investor or not an investor? Were you here? So you know.
Sure.
Okay. So you know the audience. That's pretty well.
But you didn't ask who is an entrepreneur.
I did not, but you can ask it now.
Who is an entrepreneur? And Sunil defined entrepreneur as somebody who wants control. I would like to define entrepreneur in the Jewish sense. And entrepreneur in the Jewish sense is what a Jewish mother calls her unemployed son.
So maybe we can start there. This panel is about a global innovation map, and we were talking earlier about what drives innovation. Why do certain places seem to be much better at driving innovation? Israel comes to mind. Maybe let's start with that. Why is it that that's the case? And I should just put this into context. Yossi, you're an investor, but also you've built big companies. You've sold big companies. You've started a lot of companies, 80 in fact in total if you add all the ones up. So you've got a lot of experience in this space. So great to have you on the panel to speak about this. But let's start with Israel. Why is Israel a real hub for innovation?
Okay, first of all, I would like Sunil, to say I invested in 86 internet companies. 32 of them I sold, which made me one of the best angel investors in Israel. 30 of them went totally bust in either embarrassing or stupid way, which made me one of the worst angel investors in Israel. And 23 are still hanging around. Most of them are zombies. Zombies are startups which refuse to die and refuse to live. And it's an industry where people are wasting their best years, but that's a different story.
Is that because of founder control?
Pardon?
Is that because of founder control?
No. This is, you have to understand the Jewish state of mind. This is because the entrepreneurs are very afraid of their mother-in-laws. You know, you cannot piss off a mother-in-law more than becoming a failure.
Got it.
So now regarding Israel, yes, Israel is a hotbed for startup. We have now an industry which is called high-tech safari. People are coming to Israel to watch the local animals, which are entrepreneurs, and trying to figure what we put in the water or what we give the kids to smoke, that they are becoming so involved. And usually when you ask what are the reasons, you will be told the effect of the army, the higher education, the availability of finance, the government policy, etc. But, and this brings us to what we discussed before the meeting, my explanation is totally different, and this is that every young Israeli have behind him a pushy mother which tried to see him fulfill all the premises she expected from her husband to fulfill, and he didn't. So she pushed her sibling, and at the age of 6, when he goes to school, his mother tells him, after all what we have done for you, asking you for one Nobel Prize is really too much. And then you have to spend another 12 years to prove to your mother that maybe you cannot get a Nobel Prize, but you are okay. And the Jewish mother also have a very methodological way to manipulate her son by embedding in him guilt feelings. Illustration, if I may. My mother always complained to me why all your cousins are very smart and you are the only idiot in the family and I have to be your mother. And though maybe she spent 8 years in school, she was very much interested in science and in genetics, and she told me, they are smart and you are an idiot because they are not contaminated with the genes of your father. True.
How do I? No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm just wondering how to follow up on that. But I think you're talking about partly culture, right?
Yeah, this is culture.
You said something earlier, which is culture. Obviously, there's a number of factors that contribute to culture: climate, your mother-in-law, whatever. But also, you said what your parents say about a football player on a TV screen, what your parents say about X, Y, Z, what your friends do at school. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, because I think when you've done your investments, and your philosophy about investments is very interesting, because you really go behind the team and you're really trying to understand the team and the founding team and the founding person.
Sounds great. Yeah. It's not exactly true, but this is what I say. It sounds very good.
Speak about that a little bit.
Okay, so first of all, culture. I think, in August I will be 50 years in business.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And if you ask me what at the end of the day, you know, what I took away from 50 years of running businesses, being chairman of big companies, etc. You know, when I was young, I thought there were all kinds of management by constraints, management by objectives. All of it is bull. You know, what I found, that there are few things which determine the success of a company, the success of an NGO, the success of community, the success of army unit, everything. And this is, culture is one, culture of the individual and culture of the group. The second thing is very important thing that people are not talking about, that this is the passion, the enthusiasm, the commitment, the motivation of the individual. These are the two main things. I'm spending the last 25 years of my life identifying young people who are enthusiastic, who are doing things more than the call of their job, and trying to associate myself with them in many different ways. So I think this is, if you ask me what would you recommend to me as a management style or whatever, I will tell you, find people with good culture and find people who are very enthusiastic. And this will do the job, and this is what I've done in my investment persuasion. But the truth in my investment persuasion is that I simply went and put a lot of small checks on many companies because I didn't have any idea what's going on. And I used what is called in Wharton highly diversified, high beta, high volatile portfolio. We call it, me and some other friends which are doing similar investment, we call it spray and pray.
Just on that point, so not to talk about borders necessarily, but are there certain countries that you've invested in that have a higher propensity to be successful? Meaning, have some of your investments been more successful in some countries other than others outside Israel?
Yeah, first of all, like 95% of my investment were in Israel. You know, my business is to try to build the economy of Israel. You know, I cannot build the economy of China, and I cannot build the economy of the United States. I invested in few outside investment, usually because friends of mine came and asked for help. Oddly enough, my second best performing investment was in Canada from all places. But I travel a lot, and I can tell you the following, to answer your question in a very superficial way. First of all, Silicon Valley is the Mecca, was the Mecca, will be the Mecca of high-tech investment, I think, for the foreseeable.
What's foreseeable in your definition?
Foreseeable is until China will succeed to pull the rug under them, which may take 10 years or maybe it may take 20 years.
Okay.
But Silicon Valley really created a very efficient machinery from technology, from culture, from finance, which is really the model. Israel is doing very well. Europe, I think, I don't want, who is here from Europe? Raise your hand. Maybe I shouldn't talk about Europe.
No, please do.
Please do, okay.
Be nice, no, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very nice. Europe is going to do the one thing that they excelled in the last 500 years, and this we discussed. Europe is good in one thing better than anybody else, and this is building museums. The best museums in the world are in Europe, the Louvre, the British Museum, the Prado, and Europe is becoming one big museum, and the Chinese will send here about 50 million people a year to tour the museum, and I think this is the future of Europe, because you look on the agenda, the British are arguing about Brexit, the French are arguing about the West, the Greeks are not arguing about anything. You know, the continent, instead of being productive, they are arguing and arguing, you know, and this is really very strange, with one exception.
Yes.
In East Europe, people are rising in the morning and go to work, you know, so you have West Europe and you have East Europe. East Europe, I have a lot of respect to the young people. They go to work, they write software, they do
But I mean, Yossi, yeah, no, I think I sort of get what you're saying.
You agree or you don't agree?
I'm not agreeing or disagree. I'm just,
So
I'm here as a reporter. No, but Yossi,
you must have an
Yossi,
opinion.
Yossi, just one thing though, because if you look at data and the element of trust and artificial intelligence, would you not say that some regulatory environments are very important in the creation of very successful, responsibly driven, high-growth companies?
Yes, but more, but not by not regulating than by regulating.
Sure, but there is such a thing as responsible technology that is built within a framework or a regulatory environment that makes sure that they are profitable, high growth, highly successful, but also create a huge impact on what they're doing.
But I'm still in the middle of answering the former question. We spoke about Europe, we spoke about United States, we spoke about Israel, we didn't speak about China.
Right.
So first of all, I want to say something which in the West usually is not very popular, but Sunil spoke about the 1-2 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid. And I think with all the issues that China has in many aspects, a lot of respect should be given to a government which was able to take 1 billion people and to move them from poverty in 40 years. This is something which never happened in the history of mankind. And I think that if you want to try to think how to do it for the next 2 billion people, this case should be studied with the advantages and with the disadvantages, because it was not simple, it was painful, but it happened. It happened bigger than any other country, and I'm saying this is something very significant that we are not giving enough thought to understand how it happened and whether or not it can be replicated. I don't think it can be replicated.
Well, I mean, if we are going to talk about China, I mean, if I'm an entrepreneur in the UK and I'm going to enter China, I need a license. I need to place my servers in China, on mainland China. That is not the case for a Chinese company coming to the UK. So we are not playing on the same playing field.
Did I say we are playing on the same plane? I didn't say we are playing on the same plane.
But I'm just saying, but I think you're right. Of course you're right about what's happened in China over the last 40 years. But if you were to set up a company or invest in one now, where would you do it? Would you do it
in Tel Aviv? I know everybody knows me. I know who are the best people. Why should I go anywhere? We have the most beautiful beaches. The sky is blue. The food is terrific. Every now and then we have some missiles going over our heads, but this is not an issue. Also, you go to YouTube and you see an evening where the Hamas sent 14 missiles to Tel Aviv, and the Iron Dome sent 14 anti-missiles, which knocked the 14 missiles, and the whole video, which is on YouTube, was taken in a wedding which took place under all this theater. And the people continue, to... So if you want to make an investment, come to Tel Aviv.
So you're talking about, I guess, you're probably touching on the point about resilience. And what, I mean, I'm just curious. Culture. But I'm curious about the point about Europe and museums. Can you just explain why you think that? I mean, yeah.
I think. Look, you open a newspaper and you see what is the agenda in Europe.
But that's what happens in healthy democracies, I guess, and you get that kind of engagement going.
Yeah, but I mean, again, the culture is either you go and build a country and build an industry, or you go and argue about Brexit and all kinds of non-productive things. I'm not saying they shouldn't argue, but my feeling, and maybe this is because I'm from Israel, that the balance looked to me a little bit. My English is too limited.
Just that little bit more. Come on, Yossi. When you look at the world as a whole, and you look at hotspots for talent, which is one of the biggest drivers of innovation, clearly, which hotspots excite you the most, if any, apart from Israel?
First of all, we have to recognize that potential talent is more or less equally distributed.
Yes.
Unlocking talent has to do with the the economic situation of the parents and the education of the mother. I don't know if
Totally.
people know how influential is the education of the mother. You spoke about India. You take India, 1.5, 1.4, 1.3 billion people, smart as hell. You see what happened to them when they come to Silicon Valley. If you are able to to give all the Indians the chance to develop their brain as much as they can and should, and not necessarily everybody has to be a genius, it's again issue of culture and means, then you can think what will happen in the world. If you get, today only 15% of women are from the high-tech women are only 15%. Increase it to 50%, you will have 2.5 times more talent coming into the marketplace. So the potential is amazing, and the question is education. You have to start with the education. So what we see today as hotspots, I think they are not going to be the hotspot of 20 years, where China was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, China didn't have a student in the United States. Today, they have 350,000 students learning in Yale and in Princeton, et cetera, et cetera. So the hotspot today are what I mentioned, but the hotspot in 10 years are going to be totally different.
But many of my American friends do talk about the fact that there will be a lot of Chinese going back to China to continue with their foundation.
They shouldn't do it.
Of course, absolutely. And but where are the waves of innovation clearly now, given what we spoke about earlier?
I think United States. I think Israel. I think China. I think in Europe you have, London is a very good hub of innovation. You begin to see in East Europe some very, very places you never heard about, like Cluj. Did you ever hear about Cluj in Romania?
No.
Cluj in Romania, a guy 21 years old building the kitchen of his mother autonomous car. Okay? And they are very, very, you have to be careful with their hacking capacity. I think Mumbai and the other places in India, and you see Korea coming more and more into the game, and it's a moving terrain.
And how much of that is attributed to regulatory environment? That's your last question. I don't want to end with that question. So Yossi, we have no time. We're out of time. But I would like to make sure that
so you asked me a question which I shouldn't answer.
No, not at all. I just want to make I just want to make sure that you give us our final words of wisdom about growing a company around the world, and then we'll finish the panel.
Final words of wisdom. My best investment was a company, the product was called ICQ. Anybody heard about ICQ? Raise your hand.
I used to use it. Yes. You
used to use it. All the old people used to use it. And I invested in this company with totally no understanding what the product is doing, and I told the kids who develop it, why anybody will want to send a text message when he can pick up the phone and make a phone call. So my last word of wisdom is to quote what Napoleon said. Napoleon used to say that he wants his generals to have 90% luck and 10% talent. And if he can change the proportion, he wants to increase the portion of the luck. So my recommendation, if you can have luck, it will help you in life. Thank you.
Thank you so much.